right, Paul Charchian, welcome to the show for the first time. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Glad to be here. I think this is I can't speak for everybody, but at least for you and I, this is going to be the meeting of the two people that are the 1A and the 1B in the Kirk Cousins defenders group. I'm not going to say cheerleaders because I don't think it's a matter of cheerleading. I think it's a matter of just being realistic about who he is and what he brings to the table and trying to beat down the naysayers with just logic and statistics and analysis. Yeah. Which is not the same as just being being a homer or somebody that is maybe just looking for something that isn't there.
Yeah, I get that eternally, that I'm like a Kirk eternalist, and I try to fight back and say, I'll like the next quarterback just as much, but I'm telling you, the stuff that circulates about this dude for the most part is false. And I got the same label that you did in terms of the Kirk homer, but we'll get into that. So, sir, just in case there are Viking fans that don't do much with fantasy, tell us what you do for fantasy and what you do for football in general.
Well, my current company is called guillotineleagues.com, and it's a new format for fantasy sports where instead of playing head to head like a traditional league, instead the lowest scoring team each week gets eliminated from the league, and that whole roster of players go to the waiver wire. So it's just pandemonium for everybody else. And it's got roster building like you never see in fantasy sports, because, when you draft your team in a regular league, about all you can do to augment it is maybe find somebody to trade with or take advantage of in a trade. And then there's free agents, and that's it. In this format, every week, a whole roster of players is becoming available. And so, by the time you even get to now, we're at the 1/3 point of the season, man, you're already starting to have put together a pretty darn good team. And a couple of weeks from now, you'll have a team the likes of which you've never had before. So tons of fun and really different. And I just decided to go all in on this.
Okay. Awesome. All right, Ron, we got a slate of stuff to talk about him, mostly Vikings, perhaps a little fantasy if we get off into that. What do you got for Paul Charchian, sir?
So Paul, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Met a couple times in the past, but officially meet you now.
Yeah.
And I will say I did do my first year doing the Guillotine leagues, and I jumped in and to do a super chop and a normal one. So still alive.
Nice. Still are you alive in both?
Yeah, I am. It's although the initial wave of free agents and like how much to bid, because there's holes to fill in the larger ones, obviously. So it's like, go get the guy and see what happens. So I'm liking my teams, but we'll see what happens as it gets to cutting time here.
How do you like the bidding strategy that you've got every Wednesday to try to figure out, do I put in all my chips on Alvin Kamara when he pops free and that kind of stuff?
So the one where and this is my fault because I should have at least put $1. Like DeAndre Hopkins went unclaimed on Wednesday's waivers, and so no one bid anything on it. So I looked, and then the next day I'm like, well, okay, I'll go 11 because if no one's gonna go for it, I'll at least whatever. Someone went 20, and I'm like, man, missed my chance of just filling it. But that's part of the fun. It's not knowing what's gonna happen. So but anyway, so getting back to our Vikings talk with Kirk Cousins, obviously, I don't have the voice to be as loud, but I'm right there with you guys when it comes to being on that bandwagon and being a lifelong Vikings fans. I get the feeling sometimes that fans feel spoiled at the quarterback play that we've had, so they take it for granted when we actually do have something. And I know Dustin predicates everything on stats, and you as well on logic on a lot of things. So my thoughts are when it comes to Kirk, because he's proven to be what he is, like a very good quarterback, can be great at times and then have bad games, as all quarterbacks do. But my question is, what are your thoughts on Kirk beyond this season and even next season? I know next year he's got about a $45 million cap hit. But what are your thoughts on maybe a long-term extension to kind of spread that cap hit out, as well as just what he brings to the table being a 33-year-old quarterback?
Well, as you guys all know, one of the core crux from the Kirk haters is the contract, and it is expensive. I believe he's lived up to it. I think he's the 9th highest paid quarterback this year, 8th highest paid. He's playing clearly as one of the 8 or 9 best quarterbacks in the league. I think it's indisputable. But I think we're at the point where you get to a point where this is about as much as you can afford to pay any quarterback. And so any extension to my eyes, any extension beyond where he currently is can't go much higher than about where he currently is. And, next year's big delta is pretty painful. And so even with the big influx that's coming to the cap, thanks to gambling money is going to move this cap. But I don't know when, and I don't know by how much. So given what we know right now, I think he's still got at his age and at the amount that, and considering he didn't play for those first 3 years, I still think he's got 4 or 5 good years left in him in all probability. And I'd be fine locking him up at a contract that's similar to what he's making today, assuming he would do that. How do you guys feel?
Wes, let me ask you. So I did one of those polls on Twitter, and not necessarily scientific, but it had like 2,500 people respond. And I was astonished that the poll asked, would you, if the Vikings miss the playoffs so that they get slaughtered in the first round, which structure do you support? Do you support firing Zimmer and getting a new quarterback? Do you support keeping Zimmer, getting a different quarterback, firing Zimmer, keeping Kirk, blah, 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 so on and so forth? And the vast majority, like out of nowhere, said they would rather fire Zimmer and keep Kirk.
Yeah.
And I feel that dialogue has changed in like the last month. Wes, do you think that the tide is turning, or is this temporary? Or speak on this year and beyond on Kirk and the Vikings.
I think with Kirk, we're seeing what happens when you provide him with adequate blocking. Obviously, the Cleveland game, he faced 50% or so pressure on every drop back, and a lot of that pressure was applied with 4-man fronts, which is really going to be anybody. It just highlights more when it's Kirk because he's polarizing. But I think with the protection that he's had over the last year of games, so the last 16 games, his stats have just been phenomenal. I know you had posted something about it on Twitter since what was that third game that he had?
Yeah, the Falcons. Yeah, the game
Falcons,
where
that's right. But yeah, people are seeing and probably starting to realize, like, okay, he can cook once he has somewhat enough of an offensive line. He's definitely got the weapons on the outside, and Thielen and Jefferson, Cook coming out of the backfield. Finally have a viable third option in KJ Osborne.
that's
So
humongous.
yeah, quarterbacks don't grow on trees. I can, see the Vikings staying with Cousins. He's obviously proved himself prior to this year, but even more so this year.
I think what folks are seeing, and especially this year, because for some godforsaken reason, all but one game has come down to the final play. And there's this misnomer that Vikings games are always close and they always do this to us. But it's really a new phenomenon. Last year and this year is when all of these tight games started happening. Prior to 2020, the pandemic season, it was either the Zimmer Vikings won decisively or they lost decisively. And all of a sudden, we're getting all of these barn burners. And since we're Vikings fans, we're cynical. We just feel they're coming, and every game happens like this.
Yeah.
But we're starting to see Kirk in those moments where, if there was more of them in 2018 or 2019, when lo and behold, he won the Saints playoff game, I think that's what's turning the conversation is in late in games, people want their $33 million man to win the game. And I think reasonable folks are starting to see, like, this guy actually does it. And they're doing an introspective to figure out, like, God, maybe he isn't that bad. So. Paul,
sorry, I think to your
go ahead.
sorry to interrupt, to your poll where it seems like the tides have turned a little bit, because when Kirk unleashes it, like, I mean, there's not many more accurate quarterbacks in the league with the arm talent that he has. Like, he proved it in that Saints game, playoff game, with that throw to Thielen, and then obviously that throw to Osborne, where now you see the all 22 with Thielen running underneath. So it's, look at the guys who say that Kirk's a check down guy. Well, he took a shot to end it. So he's clearly capable. And, Charge, to get back to your original question, for me I'm not saying to give Kirk a Mahomes type extension. That's, like, obviously you don't do that, but yeah, like, if he's right around where he's at in that 10 to 12 ranking of quarterback as far as pay, I'm all for it. Like, even if Mond is potentially the guy down the road, like,
He's
you have
not.
a guy, like, yeah,
It's a whole other conversation, but
that worries me too. But
they
again,
blew
like,
that pick, man. Davis Mills has he's not looked great, but here's what he's showing right now is the arm strength and ability requisite of building upon. And,
Right.
he is making some hard throws, really
Absolutely.
tough throws that you have to have an NFL caliber arm to make. And Davis Mills is making them. And I know a lot of people aren't watching Texans football, but I think this is going to go down as a blown pick. And I don't know that Davis Mills is going to be like the quarterback for the future for the Texans, but based on we've seen it with Mond, and who I did not like going into the draft, there's nothing that we've seen so far to suggest that he is.
But even with Kirk, again, he's 33. Like, people act like he's so old, like he's Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
He's not. Like, Phillip Rivers, like up until like last year, like he was great until 36, 37. So you have a window there, and
Right.
if you keep the things around it, the offensive line, obviously now it's a homegrown 5 guys who, really 6 if you count Wyatt Davis as that guy and Ole Udoh as a swing backup. Like, they have guys to build around to keep him upright. And even Darrisaw in the game and a half, like, he's grading out well, he's looking the part. And if they hit on that pick, then who cares really about the rest of the draft class, really, because it's all about protecting Kirk and keeping him upright. And then you look back the year ago with KJ Osborne coming in and being kind of a more dynamic Jarius Wright, which Jarius Wright was always solid, but now you have a guy who can make plays and run after catch and be good in open space. That gives you an added element that, again, looking forward to next year, Irv Smith comes back. Now you're looking at 4 weapons in the passing game that we really haven't seen since the likes of the 3 deep.
Yeah, Osborne's a playmaker, and that's what stands out right now. Is he's making the big plays. He's not just catching the ball and getting 8 yards like BC Johnson or, to a degree, Chad Beebe. He's making the big plays, and I think that's what really stands out. So I want to switch over to the other side of the ball, Paul. So each game, the Vikings defense is steadily improving, and there are certain metrics that are phenomenal, and there's certain metrics where the run defense still isn't there. And then, of course, these late 4th down anomalies that we get shredded. Do you foresee that to come along like with the rest of the defense, or do you think it's going to be this defense that's pretty good, but for some reason in big spots just blows it?
You're talking about 4th down in particular here, I believe. And that's I can't give you, especially with Patrick Peterson out for at least three weeks, or I guess 4 weeks and 3 games. I can't give you any real assurance that the Vikings get better. Vikings defense gets better in these big spots, except that a regression would suggest they should. You really should. If you're at a certain level on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down, you ought to be able to play better on 4th down. And I'm sure that schematically things are pretty different on 4th down and how they handle 4th and 15, which they've managed to give up. But I'd like to believe it will get better, but I can't really give you a reason. Can't come back and say, well, okay, against these particular looks on these 4th down situations, they're going to be better rolling, coverage this way. Who knows? I just can't say, well, Rashad Breeland's going to be a lot better, or Cam Dantzler is going to be a lot better than he ever has been. Because I don't know that. I hope that's the case, but I don't know that to be the case. So
now is Trey Flowers, is that a name that
oh God,
intrigues anyone?
No.
Is it,
oh no,
has he just
no.
been
no,
he just seems like a Zimmer kind of guy, the 6'3", like lanky corner. I can't say I've seen what he's done the last year and a half in Seattle, but
well, I can tell you that you don't, because you don't want to know what he was doing in Seattle.
Okay.
He was so bad. He was so bad as their starting quarterback that after week 4 they benched him, and then week 5 they cut him, and they brought in Sidney Jones after he got benched. Sidney Jones has gone on to give up a perfect passer rating in his coverage. So it's been all bad, and Trey Flowers was terrible, and I don't want any part of that guy. I'd rather I'd rather find some kid and just, work with some kid and see what you can get out of him.
Can't get worse than last year's secondary, like all the injuries depleted and everything. So
God, no.
Yeah, the free agency wire is down to Nubbins. Sherman was kind of the last gasp, and he got hurt too, but he went to the Bucks. And then it's going to have to be relying on Hand whenever he's back. Chris Boyd, if he can figure it out, or like Darquise Dennard. I wrote about him today on Vikings territory. He's been pretty solid his whole career, but he's a free agent. So
which is I'm shocked he's still out there. Just given the pedigree, and granted, it never worked out based on, was he first rounder, I think, for the Bengals. Never really worked out for him. But yeah, I was really surprised that no team had him. Speaking while we're talking cornerbacks, Mackenzie Alexander's been pretty damn good.
He's been great.
Covering the slot used to be like, hey, we'll just put our third best corner in the slot. But he's their best corner by almost any metric you want. Hasn't allowed a touchdown this season. Doesn't give up yards after the catch. He's been really good. And it's a lot of teams have got like their best receiver running out of the slot, or three and four receivers three receivers run out of the slot, or a great stand-up tight end who works in the slot. And it's become a really important spot to have a highly competent slot cornerback. Mackenzie Alexander's been that. And, I don't know what happened in this year away. What I've been told is the year away in Cincinnati was a year of personal maturity for Mackenzie Alexander. And I think there's might be a little something to that. And I, thank God for him. And that relatively anonymous signing when it happened like 2 weeks after the free agency period started. And that's a
minimum deal.
Minimum deal. Yeah. 1 year minimum deal. How about if we just, let's not talk so much about locking up Kirk in 2025. How about Mackenzie Alexander and Xavier Woods, who's played great.
Yeah.
I think
that wasn't a penalty.
No, that wasn't a penalty. How about we get those guys are on 1 year deals? We don't have really any cornerbacks coming back outside of Chris Boyd next year. I think Boyd's the only cornerback under contract for next year.
Dantzler too.
And Dantzler. Yeah. So that's what I'd like to do.
The thing with Alexander too, it's like the physicality he's playing with, like that. You didn't see that the first go around when he was here, and maybe like you said, he's like grown as a person. I know he had that issue with his father, that like whatever kidnapped or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So maybe kind of he, took a step back, put his life into perspective, and given it all. So. But yeah, that's a great point, Charge. He's been phenomenal out there.
Wes, do you think that this defense, I think the only thing separating them from being, they're close, like for PFF and stuff, they're already back up there in that Zimmerian mode. But do you foresee that these gaffes late in games will tighten up, or is this kind of just what we're going to live with?
Maybe towards the end of the season, not having Patrick Peterson back there, veteran presence that has been through and seen a lot of different things from various offenses throughout the years is going to definitely hurt. Also, just the stretch of games that we have, we don't have any chumps that we're facing on offense. It's an offensive driven league. And, I think we're going to get everybody's best punch because teams are realizing, they can't take weeks off. Buffalo kind of took their foot off the gas on Monday night and they got caught by a hungry Tennessee team. I don't see us being able to make all the adjustments, at least through this stretch, to compensate for that. I think, we might win a series here or two, but we'll also give up a series here or two.
The other thing that came to mind on Alexander, I want to point out, is that when we signed him, to me, it felt like an embarrassment of riches, embarrassment of depth, because nothing had happened with Gladney yet. So I was like, God, we're just going to be 5 deep at this spot. This is pretty sweet. And to Paul's point, now it feels like a godsend because Gladney's gone. Peterson's gone for the worst possible time on the schedule. He's going to miss Cowboys with the best receiving core in the world. It's like the worst possible murderer's row of 3 games that he could miss is coming up on this Viking schedule anyway. Raun, what's your next thing for Paul Charchian tonight?
So, Charge, I know obviously you're a Vikings fan, but obviously your expertise, not that you're not an expert on Vikings football, but fantasy football world. And, being the Godfather of Fantasy Football is, here in Minnesota, as you're well known as, obviously between watching Vikings games and then other games that are going on, how much other film study or how much other review do you have to go into to kind of come up with your weekly rankings?
Oh, good question. In a different world, so it's different for me than it is probably for you three. When you guys have the luxury of watching the Vikings game live, and then you can go back and go, "Ooh, I want to watch Oli Udoh. I want to watch every one of Oli Udoh's snaps." And so you can go back through and you can just go, "Okay, I'm going to watch every play. I'm just going to grade out Oli Udoh, and I'm really going to get my arms around where he is as a player." I'm doing 32 teams. So I can't do that. So a lot of my Monday is spent with Game Pass on, and I spend my Sundays watching the DirecTV 4x2, where I've got the 8 games on, and I'm just trying to take in 8 games at once, which over the course of the years I've actually gotten reasonably good at. But then on Monday it's just condensed film, and I'm just I've just got the condensed games on as I'm working on rankings and just trying to do all the other things I'm doing. I've got the condensed game on, so I can keep track of broadly what's happening with 32 teams. And so so in that regard, I think I'm shallow. I don't have the depth of knowledge that I'd love to have with the Vikings, that some people that just all they do is Vikings, I think, have an advantage on me. You guys probably do. But I feel really good about being able to break down Davis Mills when when he comes up. So yeah, that's the advantage. And so that's, for me, that's my process, and that's what I'm watching. And I'd like to call it film study, but I can't do all 22 on 32 teams. So yeah, so for me, that's how the process works.
And then as a follow-up to that, like, you obviously have the time and effort spent into your weekly rankings, which is literally like, if I ever have a question, like, that's where I go, because
Thank you.
It's not just a rank, you get an analysis on it. Like, this is why it is. Like, that's what, anyone can rank someone 1 through 10, but it's like, well, why? Like, why is Tyson Williams going to be the guy week 1? I don't know. But anyways, with that, I know, like, you get a lot of tweets, like, you have a big following where, who do I start, Jerry Jeudy or this? Like, and I know like now it's great. Just go check it out on guillotineleagues.com. But honestly, how annoying does that get? Because I get mad when people ask me questions. I'm like, don't make your decision based on my opinion. But for you, like, that's gotta be, I have a platform, you have a following, just go check it out.
It's gotten so much better than it used to be. I think just now, after directing people there for years, it's, I only get maybe 20 on Sunday, and 10 on the days leading up to that. It used to be way worse. It was 50 or 100, and just eventually I just think I've trained people into just looking at my rankings, because really, I mean, there it's got the complete breakdown. I can't do that. I can't do that on Twitter with its Twitter count, and I can't give you the breakdown on all the guys. And you can go read them and just decide if you agree with me. If I've got guy X 5 spots ahead of your other guy Y, you can read about why and decide if you agree. And that's, that helps. And so that's why we go through all the effort to explain give all the rationale behind the rankings. And most people don't do it, but we do. And we don't even charge for it, which maybe that's a mistake. Maybe I'm losing money on this deal.
Trying to deal with the Athletic and
yeah, right. Right. I got a bunch of friends that work for the Athletic fantasy department. I don't know. Maybe it's time to tap those.
There you go.
The number one question I get, and it's not quite 20 per Sunday, but I'd say it's about 5 to 6 a week, is people wanting Cousins stats because they're in an argument with their friend.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yep. And I can, if they're reasonable, I can usually, especially about a year ago when I had more free time, I was able to usually pull them. But now I kind of instructed them how to exactly copy paste like my name with Kirk Cousins and Twitter, and then you get the whole experience. But that's the one that I get. And then there's some of them that are one-offs that I actually will have memorized, because I've had to combat it so many times, whether it's garbage time or the check down one. That one I can look up real quick and I know exactly where to go. But that's fine. It's not as egregious as 20 per Sunday, and I don't really have a website where I can direct. Maybe that's what I need. I need to go to the Athletic and have this archive of Cousins.
You need an archive of all of your Kirk tweets so that you can just route people when like, oh, he's a stat patter, in the fourth quarter. Okay, here you go. Go to this tweet. Have them all cataloged. So
Yeah. No, that's not
Matt
a bad
Stafford.
idea.
The rules don't apply to Matt Stafford.
Oh, yes. That one always gets me, because it really circulates about once every 90 days. It's a Cousins and Stafford comparison. I always joke about it. Oh, yeah, here we go. I've got this one ready.
All right.
Yep. And now I have to update them, because people usually want last 50 games or something like that, but that's easy enough to do.
Yeah.
Here's my next thing, Paul. So you talked about how you believe Cousins deserves to, if he keeps playing like this. He puts up these 30 touchdowns like clockwork with the 4,000 yards. But let's say that the Vikings are more akin to the team that barely beat the Lions, and they finished 7-10 or 8-9 or something. mediocre.
Mhm.
How much structural change do you predict for this team if they don't make the postseason?
What really does factor into this is the fan base can facilitate a coach staying or leaving. And right now, Zim's lost the fan base largely. And you alluded to it earlier. The people have shifted their allegiances or their frustration from Kirk to Zim, and to a lesser extent, Clint Kubiak. And if you think that the ownership doesn't know that, they do. They absolutely know, and they have a real sense of whether or not the fan base is behind a coach, and it matters. And Zim's, I think this is his last chance. What is he, the fourth longest tenured coach?
Belichick,
And
Carroll, and who's the other one, Wes?
Belichick, Tomlin.
Yeah, there it is.
Carroll.
I think it's
and
Zimmer then.
I think Zimmer might be fourth right
Mhm.
now. So what are we, year 8, I think, for Zimmer? I mean, it's a long time for any one coach. And so I think this is it. I think if it doesn't happen here, Zim's gone. There'll be a case. I believe Spielman will stay. And but I can't say that for sure either. I mean, a lot of times they go hand in hand so that you don't have these guys point at each other and they bring in, they do both at the same time. It happens all the time. But I think there's got to be a playoff win. I think one and done wouldn't be good enough either. I think you have to get to the playoffs and go win a playoff game to make sure that Mike comes back. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Wes, what about you? I think we've talked about this, but we did it on the backdrop that, Kirk was still the figurehead for criticism. And it's just strange that all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe he's the problem. So where do you evaluate? Let's say it's 8-9. We get the 8th seed. And of course, we don't even get to dance. What happens to Zimmer, Wes? What happens to Spielman?
Zimmer would more than likely be gone at that point. Spielman, that one's a tough sell. It's tough to say. I agree with Paul, though. It's usually a hand-in-hand deal. If one goes, the other probably would. Spielman's been around
2006.
Yeah, I was going to say 14, 15 years. So, yeah, he's definitely built some good teams. He's, I think, done a really good job at evaluating talent. I think in terms of opposing GMs, he has a pretty high hit rate for his draft picks. Definitely made a few panic trades. Bradford, Herden.
The kicker.
Yeah.
Vedvig.
Kari Vedvig.
Yeah, so we just rattled off. We didn't even put in Ngakoue in there. So that was like
Ngakoue. Yep.
And so it seems like his draft night trades are profitable for the most part. And the ones that come outside of that are like, boy, what are you thinking?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a master when other teams are up against the clock, but when he's up against the clock of it, his own volition in a way, he tends to panic. So he very well could see himself out. But I could also see a case for him staying and maybe bringing back the triangle of power or whatever.
Not the exact same guys, but
yeah.
Ron, what do you got on the triangle that we already have? Zimmer, Spielman, and Cousins. If it goes 8-9, how many of those dudes play for the 2022 Vikings or associated with 22 Vikings?
So I agree with Paul. I don't think one and done in the playoffs is going to be enough to save Zimmer's job. I do think it needs to be a deeper run, unless that one and done happens to be in the divisional round because they somehow miraculously get by. But I think it needs to be a run where, it's not necessarily championship, but they need to be able to show that they have the moxie to get there. Now with Spielman, I do kind of think Spielman and Zimmer are a package deal, but my concern with that is with George Payton gone, I don't know if they have a requisite person to elevate. So that may in itself keep Spielman's job because maybe too much turnover. might be too much. But then again, with a new GM usually brings a new coach in. So it very well could just be a package deal. I think Kirk's going to be here next year regardless. I think the cap hit you can't get rid of because you can't trade it because then you're punting on next season. Like you literally have no money to do anything. And, Mod isn't the guy unless there's some massive development at some point from now to then. So I see Kirk here and I see an extension in place just because it seems like that's it at fair market value. I don't see him as that Dak Prescott money, but that's what I think is going to happen because of where the team is at. Now, as far as with Zimmer, like to your point, where his fan base seems to be that can drive a lot, and with Kirk being able to show that he can go out and, throw for 300 something yards, put up 571 yards of total offense and, give a dagger at the end. Like when given the opportunity to all this year, like this has been the most stressful 6-game stretch that I can remember as a Vikings fan, like where everything comes down to one play except for that Seahawks game. And he's answered the call every single game. So I think he's doing enough to at least maybe not win over the fan base, but at least appease them to the point that, hey, $30 million in being a top 10 ranked quarterback or paid quarterback versus the initial first fully guaranteed deal. I think that shock is going to be gone. And people are looking around at, like we talked about a few weeks ago with Bryant, where look at the development of Jared Goff. Like he plateaued, fell off. Wentz fell off. Like Baker Mayfield, like who knows what to expect with him. Like these quarterbacks are all getting paid more than Kirk, if not just as much. And they're not nearly as good, but they're younger, but they may have hit their peak. So I would think that Kirk's back, the other two most likely gone if the team doesn't turn it around and make a run.
So point of order there. If indeed we had a first round bye, that means we're about to embark on an absolute glorious 3 months.
Historic run.
Yeah, that it's like 2017 and then some, because to get to the first round bye, you probably need 14-3. And so that perhaps that's a call that Ron put up. All right, Ron, we got about time for 2 more for Paul tonight. What do you got?
All right. So the next one, let me pull it up here real quick because I think Paul, in all seriousness, with this Vikings team, the way they're constructed and the way that they're playing, assuming the kind of the defensive pieces that are missing, that we're not going to completely miss them, how far do you think this team as is following the bye, how far do you actually think they can go? Not just as a fan base with a fan with optimism, but just realistically.
Yeah, the cold hard facts. So Cowboys game, tricky game without Patrick Peterson in particular, because they stretch you thin with the 3 receivers that they've got and 2 quality tight ends and a running back who can catch. And, I think the Peterson loss will be really tricky. Then you've got the Ravens game, which also is not obviously, and it's at Baltimore. We just saw at Baltimore humble Justin Herbert. So that's hard. Then you got to go face Justin Herbert in his stadium. Then you've got the Packers. I think the Vikings will probably be underdogs for all of those games. And I can't tell you that they, if I think the best case scenario is you come out of that at the same 500 you are now, go, 2 wins, 2 losses. And, you're rolling into San Francisco with a winnable game at San Francisco, winnable game at Detroit. And hopefully you're 5-5 at that point, and you go pick up 2 wins there. And now you're 12, and here come the Steelers. That is a winnable game against the already wobbly, very wobbly and borderline decrepit Ben Roethlisberger. So you turn that into a win. You can beat the Bears. Now we're at 14 wins. Rams, let's call it a loss. At Packers, a loss. We're still at 14. Then you go beat the Bears, and there's 15 wins. And that number's not right. We're not at 15 wins. How did I get my math off? I don't know.
I think you missed week
14, week 15.
I think I went from 5-5 thinking that was 10.
Yeah.
I don't know. So now I'm all off. I don't know.
Well,
so what do we? I think that might have been 11 wins at the end of the day. I'm not positive.
Well, if history shows, maybe go ahead and book your divisional round cruise now.
I would like that. God, that'd be great.
Just to
I want the cruise, and B, I would like if any part of my crews can bring this team to an NFC championship
There you
game,
go.
I'm in.
And realistically, we may only be favored in 3 of the remaining games, and that's the Steelers, Lions, obviously, and Bears. After that, the schedule is absolutely tough. So
It's very hard. I just want to get 2-2 in the next 4 to me is just critical. You're gonna find wins, and
The easy way
that's
to do that is just win at home.
well, yeah, that'd be that'd be nice. We would take home wins. That's Dallas and Green Bay, and the Green Bay win counts double in some regards. So yeah, that'd be great.
That's what I'm banking on for my my hope to survive this stretch, because it's just so nasty. Each time through this last month, you try to figure out, are we good or are we not? Should have beat the Cardinals, we didn't. Should have lost to the Lions, we didn't. So each time, I'm on my couch thinking, is this team good? Then I'm like, you know what? I think that they are. I think they're going to clean up some of the trash that happens in late game situations. But then I almost feel like it's nullified, because I look at the schedule and I was like, well, they have to be good. They have to be absolutely phenomenal to slay these opponents, because there's even the West. You pointed this out on one of my tweets last week, and it remained the same this week. Per Tankathon, wins and losses, the Vikings have the most difficult schedule left, and the easy games are the Steelers and the Niners.
Yeah, right.
And you're like looking at it, like when I looked at this schedule a month ago, I was like, the Steelers, we have to play them, and then have to go to the Niners. We stink in late afternoon games on the West Coast. And somehow, based on some quarterback instability or, the corpse of Roethlisberger, those look like ones that you should win. But we all know how the Vikings do in games like that, when it's like, well, this should be when we take care of business. It turns into a slop fest. And the rate that we're going, there's just these mini miracles that happen, mini heartbreaks, and they're all within like 5 minutes of each other. It's wild. And to your point, Ron, like, I feel that this stretch is unprecedented, where 5 out of 6 games come down to the final play. I remember being at the Broncos game, the Cousins comeback, and that was like, outside of the miracle, the only game in that stadium where the Vikings, I want to say, had like the chance to win it. And I know that Prater got them on a long ass field goal or an overtime touchdown, like 2016 or something. But I remember feeling in my body, like, this is foreign. Outside of the miracle, this is not how it usually goes in this building. Usually we win 24-10, and then I go home and I'm happy. So yeah, it's all of a sudden, since the pandemic season, these games go down to the wire, and it's a new phenomenon.
I will say, if we want to give Vikings fans some optimism and some reasons to be excited, if they have meaningful games in December, obviously I think that everyone wants that. But if they can somehow navigate this stretch, and even after that, for that next 4, it doesn't get any easier. Like you said, the Niners aren't no chump. Even the Steelers with a decrepit Ben, like, they still have that defense. TJ Watt just went beast mode on Sunday. But if there's any saving grace, if they can somehow tread water throughout this and then be that team that gets hot when the playoffs roll around, they're now that team that has gone through tough battles in the regular season. They've shown they can win in, at that point would be a myriad of different ways. Even to this point, like the 3 wins that they have, it's unprecedented. And then 2 losses that, again, very Vikings like. So again, there'll be an optimist side. Bryant, if he was here, he can attest. Joe Flacco, being an average quarterback, went on a historic run and got hot, and that's all you really need. So I don't care if it's 9-8 and you get in the playoffs at that 7th wild card. Let's see what can happen.
Oh, I like your 14-3 home field better, so we're gonna hold you to that one.
The other thing too, complicating these games, is the travel. They go to Baltimore, so East Coast, then bounce to the West Coast for the Chargers, at home against the Packers, and then back out to the West Coast, which is kind of unheard of. Reminds me of those Madden broadcast Monday Night Football games where they would have the bus. Truck going, or the bus. Yeah, there you go. Ping-ponging back and forth across the coast. So that just adds to, the difficulty of this stretch.
All right, the last thing I got, and I might have already stole your thunder, so you can reiterate it, Paul, if you'd like. Who is the most underrated Minnesota Viking through 6 weeks?
Ooh, most underrated Minnesota Viking through 6 weeks. Let me think about this. So I need a guy that's, that has played really well, maybe hasn't got the attention that he or he should have. I know I should probably be, ready to roll with this. An easy answer in years past has just been, we'll just make it Brian O'Neill because, that would have been, probably the best and easiest answer. But we already said Mackenzie Alexander, and I'm inclined to say him, but Xavier Woods has been really good. Let me just quick pull up his stats so I can give you somebody else besides Mackenzie Alexander on this. Hold on.
Fair
It's
enough.
hard to quantify safety's stats a lot though. Like unless you're a Harrison Smith type where you're always around the ball. But
Tell that to Chiefs fans that are watching Daniel Sorensen play. They can eyeball a guy getting roasted over and over again.
Even Tyrann Mathieu can as the plays going on. So.
Yeah. All right. So here we go. Xavier Woods passes in his coverage, 0 touchdowns allowed. He's managed 1 pick. The opposer passer rating on throws in his coverage, 49. That's it. That's awfully impressive. He has allowed roughly 50% of the passes in his coverage to be completed, which is a small number. Xavier Woods is a really sneaky, I think, answer for this. And I might take Xavier Woods on this. What do you think?
Yeah, you stole mine.
Yeah.
Was that yours? Okay.
Yeah, no, but that's okay. That's just a testament to what he's doing. It's a lot of that. You always eternally try to figure out, well, did you put somebody next to Harrison Smith? Are they destined to be good? Sendejo looked competent at times. Anthony Harris led the league in interception. But no, I think it's a little bit more than that. Stats you brought up confirm it. The coverage is there, and I feel like there's a trust level that when I'm watching it, I'm like, all right, well, if it goes in his direction, you don't have to live on pins and needles. Like even last year with Harris for a while, he just didn't quite have the best year. And then I also because I told Wes this, like when Woods takes off his helmet, he just looks like a badass. He looks like a boxer. Yeah, he does. He looks like he's like 45, and he looks like a boxer that's not going to take any shit from anybody. So I appreciate that in a very odd way. Wes, did we steal yours too?
Yeah, Woods is definitely up there for me. I was kind of thinking throwing a curveball and going with Barry, our punter.
Yeah.
I want to show the special teams some love. I think overall as a unit, they've been vastly improved. Definitely was one of the low points of last season. And it's a game played in all 3 phases. I think for the most part, when we have needed to punt, Barry's done a decent job with the hang time to allow the coverage unit to get down there.
And then that boomer that he hit, was it week 1? Holy
Yeah, that was nuts.
Yeah. I like this happened to us. After the hangover that we had, the bad hangover that we had from last year's historically rotten special teams. But I think it was against the Bengals where he flipped the field in like 70 yards or something crazy.
Yeah. And we haven't had that in forever. And God, Cluey used to complain all the time about it. And, not publicly, but because I was close with Cluey, he would complain to me, and I think others probably around him as well. But about, it's like, I can kick it way farther than they ever let me kick it. They want me to kick it 42 yards. And that's it. And exactly 42 yards every single time. And it's never bombs away. And that's I like that we have a coaching staff that's willing to do that, because sometimes you just need to tilt the field the other way and change the whole field position complexion of a game. And it's great to have a kicker who can do it and a coaching staff that's willing to do it.
Yeah, shout out to Ryan Ficken there. All right, Ron, take us away with your most underrated player.
So I will say, those are all great answers. Barry was one that I was thinking about, but I got to go with Conklin. I think just with the circumstances that he stepped in, coming into the year, Irv Smith was being touted as that guy that they're going to use all over the place. And the dynamic skill set that he has, but Conklin has come in, and not only in the passing game, but in the running game. Like he is showing every bit being a capable tight end 1 in this league. I know Irv Smith tweeted after he got hurt, go get paid because he is in a contract year. So unfortunately, I don't think he'll be with us next year just because of that. But man, the way he's come in, like he's stretching the field, he's being that outlet, and then he's also making plays. Very anti-Rudolph. Rudolph caught everything that came to him, but he didn't break tackles. And Conklin's showing the ability to turn it upfield, and he has some faults at times, like that drop in the end zone. I think he could have had, but who doesn't at times? But my game ball would go to Conklin on that as far as the underrated.
So, and by the way, I'm glad we sort of touched on this. How about a tip of the hat to this Vikings organization, Rick Spielman, for getting out on Kyle Rudolph when they did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's getting paid $8 million by the Giants to do nothing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need, sometimes you got to know when to move on, even from guys that you love. And that's the case here.
Very Belichick-esque.
Yeah.
That really is, isn't it? It really is. So, okay, just in our conversation, we've identified 2-3 really good moves by this front office: the Xavier Woods signing, the Mackenzie Alexander signing, and letting Rudolph walk. Yeah, those things should count. And I just, for all the hate that Spielman gets, there are still a lot of good moves that he has made that I think a lot of casual fans are very happy to just overlook that.
Yeah, and the way that him and his team have been able to maneuver the cap with Rob Brzezinski and just everything, like where it's always, well, now they're never going to be able to sign this guy, and we've really only lost Trey Waynes. Like that's, I mean, that's
that was no loss. Dude's played like 4 games since he left.
Right.
3
That's
games.
what I'm saying. As far as personnel wise, like that's the only one that's walked out the door that like people were like, well, we're not going to be able to keep them all, because every time Hunter gets extended, well, okay, even Diggs, like he got extended, he just didn't want to be here, and then it worked out great for both teams. So to your point,
better for us.
I agree.
My Conklin story is really quick. I took my daughter to the game against the Lions in 2019 at US Bank Stadium, and we had the kids club, so we got to go down on the field afterward and check everything out, and then we got to meet a player. And they had 2 Lions. They had one with Tyler Conklin, who was TE3 or TE 4th time, and Ofadia Denbo, who was like DE2, DE3. And I was like, well, your dad likes defense. Let's go meet Ofadia Denbo. And so we met him, we got the picture. And then I think a week later or 2 weeks later was the Chargers game where he scored. And I was like, he scored right after we met him, Violet. Look at this. And then flash forward the following year, he was the starter. So for about a year and a half, I thought I was all badass picking the right guy. And then Afadi doesn't play anymore, really. And Conklin's the breakout guy, and I kick myself, and I'm just like, we should have met Conklin. So that's my dad's story of the. All right, Paul. Well, we appreciate you coming on. We're gonna request you come back, probably down the stretch this season, maybe when we're tunneling towards the playoffs. Give us your Twitter name, and then we will sign off for the night.
Yeah, when I first got on Twitter, I had to decide: do I want Charch? At Charch, or do I want at Paul Charchian? And I ultimately just decided, even though Paul Charchian's a lot harder to spell, I want my own name. I don't want somebody else like taking that or whatever. So I'm just gonna be me. So yeah, at Paul Charchian. I have some regrets now. I probably just should have just squatted on at Paul Charchian and used at Charch. But it is what it is. Can't change. Well, maybe I could change it now, but somebody's got it. So probably not.
And then plus all this stuff in the world that's linked to that name and articles and all that gets a little wonky. Yep. So just keep that in mind. All right, Charch and Paul Charchian, we appreciate you, kind sir.
It was a lot of fun, guys. Thanks. I had a great time.
Yeah.
That's all we got for tonight. We'll be back next week with Bryant McKinnie and Sally from Minneapolis and Skol Vikings.